Hello, I'm Mike Buchanan, the founder and former leader of the political party Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them, J4MB. The party leader is now Elizabeth Hobson, 32. Until recently, the party's number one campaign issue was male genital mutilation, MGM, in part because performing MGM has been a crime in England and Wales since at least 1861 with the Offences Against the Person Act, and the procedure clearly causes bodily harm. Neither children nor adults in England and Wales can give consent to bodily harm being inflicted on them, other than specific exceptions such as tattooing and ear piercing. There's plenty on the J4MB website, that's j4mb.org.uk, on the party's campaigning against MGM. One high point was getting the agreement of Philip Davis, a Conservative MP, to major on the crime of MGM in the debate on men's issues that he introduced and hosted in commemoration of International Men's Day in 2018. We've interviewed Philip Davis for this conference and added some video clips of some of his finest work, including an extract from that debate. Tim Hammond gave a very well-received talk on MGM at the ICMI that we organised in London in 2016, and Brendan Marotta's film American Circumcision was screened at the 2018 event in London, which we organised. I'm delighted today to be interviewing James Loewen, a highly regarded Canadian Intactivist or campaigner against MGM based in Vancouver, Canada. James is also a photographer and videographer and has been working since 1993 to increase public awareness of MGM. James, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, James. James, Elizabeth Hobson and I recently interviewed Warren Farrell twice for this conference. The first was a promo video. The second was one of the first videos published in the conference, and it included discussion on abortion, feminism, and MGM. Warren was of the view that MGM would be made illegal in one US state within 7 to 20 years, and that the remainder would follow suit over time. He drew parallels with the rights struggles of Black and gay Americans. I wonder if you have any thoughts on this.
Well, it would be wonderful to have that, to have male genital mutilation made illegal in one of the states, and hopefully as soon as possible. I don't have any particular insight into that as to, how or when that might happen. I think, growing public awareness is how all of these changes happen. So, when that does, it's going to be a reflection that the general public has come up to speed with this issue and understands the harm that's being done with it.
No, you've been a campaigner for 27 years, I think I'm right in saying. Have you seen a big increase in public awareness about MGM over that period?
Absolutely, Mike. We've seen so much growing awareness on this, and particularly because I think of, for number one, the hard work of a number of activists who have recognized that this is a very important issue. And then also the advent of social media and platforms like YouTube, where people can upload videos and get education on this issue that surpasses the usual gatekeepers of such information. So yeah, there's been a huge sea change in understanding about this in the last few decades.
And we spoke the other day, James, when we had a planned, I think, 10 or 15 minute preparatory meeting, which went on for 2 hours, interestingly enough. So I thought we're really not going to struggle to fill 50 minutes. No. I explained at the time that Brother K is probably the best known North American Intactivist. I wonder if you could just say a few words about Brother K.
Absolutely. Brother K is one of the most amazing people I've ever met, and I've met many wonderful people in my own life, and particularly in activist circles. And the more I've worked with him, and that's been, as Brother K would say, boots on the ground on the streets of America, I've been so I've learned a lot, working with him and seeing how, first of all, he's a very kind and compassionate person and very, very hardworking. He's at this, I would say, 24 hours a day. I'm sure he dreams about, what he's going to be doing the next day or what he's just done. But he's unbelievably tireless, apparently, and he's in his 70s now, which is inspiring to all of us who are following, close behind. Yes, yeah, Brother K's been at this issue since the early 1980s, late 79, early 1980. And the first part of his work started like it does for most of us. And that's a very intense dive into research, and finding out the history and the dynamics, the politics around this issue.
Now, I just take my hat off to anybody who can do this full-time, year in, year out. It's deeply inspiring. I agree. We have no one like Brother K in the UK, that's for sure.
There's no one like him anywhere. He is an original. And Mike, you touched on something there that I should comment on, is that this is very difficult work because emotionally it's very, very hard to process the information that you find, the devastating injuries that are done to infants and children, lifelong injuries, and worse even, I guess, death is the ultimate injury. And yet the mainstream constantly denies this and refers to this as a safe and time-honored procedure,
And I guess people want to believe that, don't they? Because I know people who are very angry, who wake up angry. I'm thinking of somebody in particular. I won't name him, but he's about my age, 62, 63, and his anger is all-consuming, and it's painful to see.
There are two places where that anger percolates, and number one is in the original damage. And of course, this is not a uniform procedure, and the results of male genital mutilation are varied. Some of us are lucky enough to have come away from that still functioning in some ways, whereas others have been, more horrifically injured than others. And the second part of that is how the immediate family and friends and society reacts to coming out with these, when we start to express our feelings about this. And I think that, when I think about another famous Intactivist, Jonathan Conte, I know that the reactions that he was getting from family and from society were probably the things that led to his suicide, because it's very, very hard to strike out on your own that way. We're all creatures of social creatures, and we need comrades, people that are with us and understand what we're talking about. And if you have an issue like this and you can't find a sympathetic ear, that's a very, very hard thing to bear on your own. And of course, there are many men who have been badly damaged, and then they turn to the people that they think they can talk to, that they trust, their parents or a spouse or a good friend, and then find that person has, started to push them away just for the fact that they brought this up. Is very, very hard to take for a lot of people.
Yeah, we really shouldn't be surprised that the default setting of most men, even if you take religion out of the equation, the default setting of most circumcised men is that they don't want to understand, because especially in the area of nerve cell loss, you're not going to get those nerve cells back, however much you research it. And all you're going to do is it's just the most horrible, toxic combination of psychology, culture, and often religion. It is depressing. Just going back to Brother K for a second, James. You mentioned in our chat the other day about something that's very different in the North American. Well, the North American Intactivist scene is much stronger than the UK. I think in part because it's MGM is much more common. But you mentioned something that we see very little of in the UK, which is female intactivists. Yes. And I wonder if you could speak about Brother K in relation to his building bonds, I guess, with mothers and prospective mothers.
Yeah, this is an interesting phenomenon of the Intactivist movement, and it's complicated. I think we could talk for 2 hours just about this particular aspect of it. Some people will deride any woman who speaks up against MGM and say, you don't have a penis. Why are you even interested in this conversation? Brother K has realized that one of the most powerful forces in the Intactivist movement is the mothers who have been either duped into handing their baby over to be cut, or have come very close to it and realized how they were badgered when they were giving birth by, doctors, nurses, medical people, promoting circumcision, and often very heavy-handedly. While the mother was sedated, she was asked to sign consent forms.
Yeah,
and these women are very, very powerful advocates because they've had that firsthand experience. And I think that, this brings up two things that I learned early on in my education on this issue. Was hearing lectures that were done at the No-Circ Symposia. And one of these was by a world famous obstetrician, Michelle Odant, who said that a mammal's strongest instinct is that of a female to protect her young. And that, coupled with the work of cultural anthropologist James DeMeo, who spoke about rituals in human societies, past and present, over 100 of them that have been documented by anthropologists, that all have one dynamic in common, and that is handing the baby over for a ritual. And that these rituals include smoking the baby over a fire, insisting that he have wine on his tongue before he's allowed to breastfeed, being tossed down to a group from a high vantage point. Wow. And these are all things that override that mother's instinct to protect her child.
So if she James, this is all new to me. So the mothers are restrained while this happens, I imagine.
Well, they're restrained in different ways. They're socially restrained. The culture demands this, and these superstitions are so prevalent that many young women are brought up with this knowledge from day one. They know that when they grow up and have a baby, that baby is going to have this ritual performed on them. And all of these rituals are supposedly to benefit the baby and to somehow improve the baby's health or vitality or something. But in fact, they're all damaging to the mother-child bond. And that mother-child bond is really one of the most important relationships that any of us have in our life. And it's the grounding of all the emotional well-being or not well-being that follows.
Thank you, James. One of our disappointments at J4MB in campaigning against MGM was our failure to engage with British Jews and Muslims, and we faced some hostility from Jewish Intactivists. Time and again, I found that British non-Muslims were quite unaware that Muslims perform MGM at similar rates to Jews, and the number of Muslims in the UK far exceeds the number of Jews, I think 15-fold or something. Have you personally tried to engage with Jews and Muslims, James, and if so, with what results?
Well, this is one of the areas of this this activism that perhaps is most difficult in some ways. And over the time that I've been doing this, I've learned several techniques for engaging with Jewish and Muslim people, to discuss this issue. And certainly one of the techniques that I think is most effective is to ask questions, find out where people stand, what their thoughts, what their knowledge is about it. And that way you can, have a conversation on their level of understanding. Another is that I'm neither Jewish nor Muslim, and I'm not religious, but I have very dear friends who are Jewish and Muslim. And so I would generally, in speaking with a person who's religious, I would defer to others of that religion who are carrying forth this message. And so, for example, with regards to speaking with Jewish people about this, I would ask them if they know about the work of Jewish American anthropologist and physician Leonard Glick and his wonderful book, Marked in Your Flesh, Circumcision from Ancient Judea to Modern America, or the psychologist Ronald Goldman and his books on circumcision trauma, and also, focusing on circumcision from a Jewish perspective. And very often people don't know about the average person doesn't necessarily know about these authors and others, and it's a point that was brought to me early in my activism, was that a very high percentage of Intactivists are from a Jewish background. And I think that this is quite self-explanatory, because my understanding of Judaism is that it is a religion of questioning, and that I've been told is the essence of Judaism, is to question. So, with that beginning, I hope always, that when I'm speaking with someone who comes from a religious background, I can at least indicate that I'm respectful and wanting to engage in an intelligent conversation with them, and not an argument. But ultimately, I would leave the real, the real discussion of this to somebody who comes from that background, because they're far more informed about, the nuances of the religion and all of
that. There was a North American group. I don't know if it was from the States or Canada, called Jews Against Circumcision, and they had a really astonishing website. And we used to, at Speaker's Corner, we used to meet far more Muslims than Jews. But whenever we encountered Jews, I used to hand them over a two-sided leaflet, which was basically created by Jews Against Circumcision. And it had, perhaps I'm not a great salesman, James. I just, for the life, they might take it to be polite, but I didn't get the sense that they were going to really read it or whatever. But there is in the Old Testament. Yes, there's the bit in Genesis about circumcising at 8 days, but there's also quite a few other things that conflict with that. So I kind of took your view. Look, I'm not going to argue about religion. This is created by your co-religionists, and there's also there's a website created by Muslims called the Quranic Path. I don't know where they're from. They don't identify themselves, hardly surprisingly, and that's Quranic for anybody who wants to check it out. But again, really astonishing, saying, look, these are religious reasons we shouldn't be doing this. But I just, I can count on the fingers of one hand the number of times that I engaged more than superficially. And Jews and Muslims I found very different, James. Jews would kind of say, well, it's in Genesis, and that's kind of like, why are you wasting your time? This is a covenant with God, and that was kind of like, that's it really. And so arguments about physical damage and psychological damage didn't interest Jews. The Muslims, and even down to Muslim teenagers, I think they were too polite to say it, but I think they just assumed that we were crazy. We had placards and so on, and we'd try and engage and talk about 90% of the nerve endings, are in the foreskin, and all. None of it meant a blind bit of difference. It just went right over their heads.
Yeah.
So
it's complicated.
But I guess in Canada you have rather more, or in Vancouver maybe far more Jews than Muslims, I imagine. I don't know.
I don't know what percentages, Mike. I know that there are more Muslims now than 10 or 20 years ago.
Right.
one of the things you mentioned there about, giving this pamphlet and, whether the recipient would bother to read it or not, you don't know. And the thing is that we often don't know where our message goes. I think the best we can do is try to put it out there in as clear and concise way as possible. And again, it's like planting seeds. What I've learned doing this over the many years is that time and again, I'm surprised by when I hear about certain seeds that did take hold and root. And, various people who I thought at the time were incredibly resistant have reappeared sometimes years or even decades later and said, what you said really resounded with me. And I thought about it when I went home. So I think one of the mistakes that we make is trying to take all the information that we've got and put that with somebody else.
As if it's like as if it's a computer disk you can just hand over.
Exactly. And you're overloading their hard drive. Yeah. Really and truly, this is why I think it's so important that we ask a question and find out where people are at, and then try to plant a seed that's going to take root in their fertile brain. And, everybody's a little different. A man of 20 years old is going to hear a different message from a man who's 80. And a woman who's not had a child is going to have a very different perspective from one who has already had a child. So, and then if a parent has had a child cut, that's a very different mindset, somebody who's had a child and not had them cut. So in each case, I think we have to be aware of the fact that we can't put too much information out there, but what we should try to do is put out information that's going to work and is tailored to that person or those people that we're speaking with.
Right. Gosh, that's a big task, isn't it, to put it mildly?
Yeah.
One of the things that I used to, in fact, I did in Chicago last year at the conference, and I did in Gold Coast, Australia in 2017, was to exhort MRAs to do more practical activism. It is a source of some frustration to MRAs that, and in fact, I think on both cases, I'm pretty sure. Somebody asked me, what can I do that's practical? Certainly in Chicago, I was asked that, and I said, well, if I were a North American MRA, I would really work hard to get 10 people in blood-stained men, uniforms, outside every damn facility where this butchery is happening. And there was just like it's like like tumbleweed. It just and it's not so. I mean, I've got to say in the UK, we've had one or two decent sized protests outside circumcision clinics, but it's tough going. It's tough. Do you find in Canada or Vancouver specifically that you get a good turnout for protests? How can you give me a flavour perhaps of your Intactivism?
Well, Mike, originally when I began in the early 90s, I organized a couple of protests here in Vancouver, but I found that I was always drawn to the United States because this is where most of the activism was happening. And, as a documentarian, I needed to find others who were active in order to record that. And for me, it was too much to organize and record it. And my forte is not organizing a demonstration, although I did one here I was very proud of. We, coincided with a children's health conference. And we just happened to have so many wonderful Intactivists in town. And I was able to bring a lot of people together. And it was, I'd say, a very successful protest. But in fact, most of my activity is spent south of the border in the US and attending protests and conferences there where I can interview people and, have access to more activists.
So the Intactivist scene in the United States is a more vibrant one than in Canada, I sense.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
And you mentioned something important there, Mike. The idea of getting MRAs to get out there on the street and do it in real life, which is a very different thing from activism online.
It
And
is.
there's a place for activism online. There's wonderful work that's being done like that, but there's it's a whole different thing when you're in the three-dimensional world and talking with real people, and you're able to see their reactions, and they can see yours, and have a real-time discussion with someone.
James, I have a concern that if and when MGM is made illegal in different countries, Jewish and Muslim doctors will continue to perform the procedure and claim they're doing it on medical grounds. One obvious solution would be to have a register of doctors authorized to decide if MGM is required on medical grounds, and to make it illegal to carry out MGM for personal financial gain. Do you have any thoughts on this quite tricky issue?
Yes, I believe very strongly that this is a grassroots movement that has to focus on educating the average person. And the most fertile minds that we can reach are young adults who haven't yet had children. And those are the people we need to arm with the information, so that when they are accosted in the hospital, or even before, if the doctor or somebody else involved brings up the issue, that they are already they're very knowledgeable about it and well equipped with the information that they need in order to educate that particular doctor or authority that don't even say another word about this. I don't focus too much on trying to change the medical profession, because I think that that will come automatically once there's a groundswell of people informed about this, which is currently what's happening. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, I'm just not sure how we would stop non-medical circumcisions happening on the word of a doctor without forbidding religious doctors from carrying them out.
Well, I think the doctors are relying on their position of authority to be able to tell a parent, oh, this is the best thing, or this is the treatment that we need for whatever ailment is presenting itself. But in order to get past that, we have to have parents who are well informed, that know that cutting off a child's foreskin is not a treatment for a minor infection. So until that happens, and we're seeing this now, is these on social media, we see many instances of parents who are posting that they were at a well baby visit, and the doctor tried to retract the child's foreskin. And this is a common injury that's happening to children at these so-called well baby visits. But many parents now are aware of this and have already gone into the visit saying, the diaper will not be removed. You can check my child without looking at their genitals, or you can look, but you can't touch. So I think that's the answer here, is education of the average person.
Yeah,
and,
no, I think that's a wonderful development, James. And I guess that addresses the cultural issue, but I'm not sure it addresses the religious issue.
Well, the religious issue is similar in a sense, in that, again, back to your question about Jewish and Muslim people who are having this discussion with Intactivists, is that one of the things we can say is, did you know that there are many Jewish and Muslim parents who are not circumcising? And usually they don't know that, but once they do, that plants the seed that, oh, somebody else does it. And, as social primates, we often need to see an example set by someone else. And so, if a doctor is accustomed to having a certain authority with parents, but they run into 3 or 4 parents who all have the same reaction, no, you're not going to touch my child, then that doctor is perhaps going to be more likely to adjust their way of introducing that, and likewise for religious people too. If say a rabbi knows that several of the people in his or her congregation are not circumcising, then perhaps they're going to become they're going to have a different approach. They may then acknowledge that, yeah, some of our people don't do this.
I remember some years ago, Jay, it must be 5 or 6. I mean, I was campaigning for much of the last 5 years, every 2 weeks at Speaker's Corner on MGM. And we once had Rob Lowe, the actor, stop by and give us the thumbs up. And I was 50 yards away. The one day we get a Hollywood star stopping and saying hi, but never mind. But I remember calculating some years ago, there was I won't name the religion. It's one of the two that we talked about before. And this man, I think he was about 60, and he claimed to have circumcised, I think, 5 or 10 baby boys a week for like 40 years. And I wish I'd researched this before this conversation, but I estimated he had made millions of pounds. I mean, 5 or 6 million. And I didn't want to calculate just how many boys that amounted to, but he was very proud of it.
Do you know, Mike, I'm glad you brought that up, because, really and truly, I believe that this is a psychological issue. It's not a medical issue. It's not a religious issue. And the reason I say that is because those who are pushing this, those who are putting it, and those who are doing it are all motivated by psychological impulses, and that religion and medicine are excuses for it. They're cultural excuses for it, but it's not a religious thing. And it's not a spiritual thing, and it's not a medical thing, because there's ailment. Surgery is supposed to cure an ailment that's incurable other ways. Spirituality doesn't require the amputation of somebody else's body parts. It's just an excuse. So I think we can get tangled up, trying to figure out the motivations and how we get around why people are doing this. But really and truly, I think it's a deep, deep, deep psychological motivation. And that, if we bear that in mind, then it's really no different whether we're talking with a doctor or a religious person.
No, I'm sure you're right, James. I mean, it's often been described, of course, as a solution in search of a problem. And I mean, the current one is HIV/AIDS. 20 million.
Yes.
20 million males in sub-Saharan Africa have, suffering MGM in a completely futile attempt to halt, the progress of HIV.
I'm going to say, you say in a futile attempt to curb HIV. Well, in fact, it's not an attempt to curb HIV. It's a hoax. They know that it doesn't curb HIV. It's just another excuse.
It'll probably increase the prevalence because these men are being told they won't need to wear condoms because they won't get.
Yeah.
So, which is the number one way to spread HIV.
Well, they're actually being told they have to wear condoms, but then they're given like a conflicting message as well that says, but if you're not wearing a condom, you're more protected than if you still had your foreskin.
Yeah.
But again, it's not a.
But the research studies that are trotted out are so flawed. Somebody should be in prison, quite frankly, for promulgating them. No, I'd just like to go back to the issue of religion and Christians specifically, because, of course, I mean, I'm not religious, James, but Christians don't take the level of guidance from the Old Testament that Jews do. So Christians tend not to circumcise their kids in most of the world. There are places, certainly in parts of Africa, where Northeast Africa in particular, and Nigeria, where it's very common. But no, I was thinking of my understanding is that outside of religious communities, MGM was not common in at least the United States until the sort of mid or late 19th century with Dr. Kellogg, who saw it as a solution to masturbation, which of course was the great evil of the time.
Well, again, it's a treatment looking for a problem. And that was just the beginning in the United States of applying or trying to apply genital mutilation as a treatment for every manner of illness, particularly the illness of the day. And that's what happened in the 80s when they started trying to use it as a treatment or prevention for HIV.
Yeah. But no, I'm persuaded by your points. I've never quite thought of it that way. That psychology is driving the other stuff. I'd never quite looked at it through that lens. So that's interesting. Thank you, James. Do you have any grounds, James, as a Canadian, for hoping that Justine Trudeau, your Prime Minister and one of the most prominent manginas in the world, will ever advocate for an end to the mutilation of the genitals of Canadian baby boys?
My short answer is no. And the explanation for that is twofold. One is Trudeau is let me start again. I feel very strongly that this is a grassroots movement, and we make a mistake based on how we're brought up to look at authority as feeling that we need to go to those authorities to have validation and have them change the laws and so on. But in fact, this isn't the way that humanity advances. It's very rare that any politician does anything really groundbreaking or controversial. They're certainly not going to take on a controversial issue that will lose them votes. And so I think, again, this is a grassroots issue. We have our work cut out for us educating the average person. And so, in a situation like dealing with a prime minister or a politician, I think our time is far better spent speaking with the average person, as I said earlier, young adults who have yet to become parents, and to let the politicians continue to just make themselves irrelevant, doing their thing on the world stage. But this issue is going to be one in the hearts and minds of the average person, and it will filter up. It's not going to trickle down.
No, I'm sure you're right, James. I mean, it won't surprise you to learn that when Philip Davis MP had the illegality of MGM as at the centre of his International Men's Day debate 2 years ago, there was not so much as one sentence in the global mainstream media. Not one sentence. In fact, I wasn't there for that one, but a couple of his other debates, there weren't even any reporters in the room in Parliament for the International Men's Day debate. I mean, the International Women's Day debate, there's no space left on the benches. The International Men's Day debate, there's a committee. What's it called now? The Women and Equalities Committee, which is a great name, isn't it? And the minister has never turned up for the Men's Day debate. They can't even pretend to care, which is good for us, because it kind of like, it shows the reality of what we're up against. But would I sort of just finally, James, I sense that you're quite optimistic after these 27 years that things are going in the right direction, and the fact that you're still you're still an Intactivist. I guess you look forward to a bright future.
Oh, I do. I have to be an optimist because it's a painfully disturbing issue, and I think I take my my outlook on this from the many wonderful people that are working on this and other issues, and just seeing that it's hard work it's hard work that's going to get us where we want to go with this. And the formula that we're using is always morphing, based on the technology and the tools that we have at hand, and the successes, the small successes that we make that generate us into the future. And I'm very optimistic because I see this issue resounding with younger people. And whereas some of us who began this work some decades ago took quite a while to come up to speed, by going down the rabbit hole, so to speak, learning about this issue. Now, based on the work of these early Intactivists, the information is there. So younger Intactivists come up to speed very, very quickly with it. And of course, the technology is with us that, we have now ways of connecting and using our own media as opposed to relying on the mainstream media, which we've already learned we cannot rely upon. So
no. Thank you, James. No, I'd just like to end with hopefully an upbeat comment of my own that I believe the first countries in the world that will make MGM illegal and enforce it, importantly, because MGM's illegal in the UK, but it still goes on. I think there'll be Scandinavian countries. There are 4 or 5 children's commissioners in Scandinavian countries calling for an end to MGM. And when that happens, and I think that may be, it may be sooner than we might expect, I think people are going to say, well, hang on, how is it that that baby boys in Sweden and Finland and Norway and Iceland are protected from having their genitals butchered, but not American children, not Canadian children? And I think that is morally so utterly indefensible. I think that could drive things, and I don't know. But James, thank you. It's been an absolutely fascinating interview. Thank you so much for your time. And
thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And I know this interview is going to get a great reception. Very interesting. Thank you so much.
I hope so, Mike. Always hope that it will fall on the ears of someone who will be inspired to help continue this work.
Indeed. And it's a wrap, James. Fantastic.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. That was really good. And I think that it's probably going to be about 50 minutes. So because it's
perfect.
I mean, within a minute or two. So there's a tiny bit of editing, but nothing to talk of. So very good. Well, I guess.
Mike. Well, thank you so much.